Good morning. I'm Eileen Dengler, Executive Director of the New Atlantic Independent Booksellers Association. And with my friend and colleague, Linda Marie Barrett, who's Executive Director of the Southern Independent Booksellers Alliance, welcome to New Voices, New Rooms. This morning we begin with an important and an affirming book, All Because You Matter. Here to introduce the authors is Liza Baker, Vice President and Publisher, Cartwheel Books and Orchard Books from Scholastic. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I am Liza Baker, publisher of Orchard Books at Scholastic, and I am tremendously honored to welcome each of you to our All Because You Matter event this morning. Today, we are celebrating the momentous publication on October 6th of this masterful creation by the talented duo of author Tami Charles and illustrator Bryan Collier. Tami is a former teacher and a gifted writer of books for children and young adults. Her middle grade novel, Like Vanessa, earned 3-starred reviews and was a Junior Library Guild selection. Her recent titles include middle grade novel, Definitely Daphne, picture book, Freedom Soup, and a YA novel, Becoming Beatriz. And we are thrilled to be publishing Tami's next YA title in spring 21 at Scholastic. Bryan is the acclaimed illustrator of many beloved picture books, including his award-winning titles, Dave the Potter and Martin's Big Words, among many. He is a 4-time Caldecott Honor winner, a 9-time Coretta Scott King Honor and Award winner, and a recipient of the Hornbook Honor Award, the NAACP Image Award for Best Children's Book, and the Ezra Jack Keats Book Award. The moment All Because You Matter crossed my desk and I first read Tami's spellbinding poetic tribute to her son and to Black and brown children everywhere, it literally sang to my heart. And I knew instantly that I had to be part of bringing this beautiful book into the world, and that Scholastic was the meant-to-be publisher for it. I felt to my core how urgently the world needed this book to joyously tell children of color how much they are loved and cherished, and also begin conversations about race and racism in every home, classroom, and library right from the start. And then I met Tami, and I witnessed her passion, her spirit, her smarts, her sense of fun, her boundless creativity, and we dreamed of the perfect and the one and only possible artist for this book. And we whispered his name, Bryan Collier. Bryan, who majestically layers so much depth, beauty, and emotion into his work, took this book to new levels and heights, with ancestral petals woven into each page and arresting paintings that are going to take your breath away. Tami and Bryan take readers on an unforgettable journey, traveling through space and time, back to the empires, the pyramids, the legacies, and the many hands and hard work that labored and loved, reminding young readers of their proud ancestry. And soar forward to the present day when a beautiful child is born, overcomes challenges, and through it all is loved infinitely. With heart-lifting language and beautifully layered collage illustrations, we witness tender toddler milestones, the magic of a Black child seeing himself for the very first time in a picture book, the loving bonds of family, first experiences, grappling with hardships, with racism, with tragic loss, but at the heart, this is a story of love and resilience, and the message we must all share with our children. You matter, you've always mattered, you always will. This is a conversation starter, a community touchstone, a deep affirmation of worth, and I am so honored to welcome Tami and Bryan here this morning with this book. There's going to be a Q&A at the end of the presentation, so please share your questions in the Q&A, not in the chat, throughout the presentation, and we will get to that at the end. But before Tami and Bryan speak this morning, we're going to begin with a short video. So enjoy the presentation.
They say that matter is all things that make up the universe. Energy, stars, space. If that's the case, then you, dear child, matter. That strength, power, and beauty lie within you. All because since the beginning of time, you mattered. They mattered. We matter. And always will.
Hello, my name is Tami Charles, and I'm the author of All Because You Matter. I love seeing that video. It just grabs my heart every time I see my son's eyes. I love the way Bryan drew his eyes. I'd like to thank NABA and SIBA for the invitation today. It's a real honor to speak to booksellers about my favorite topic, books. I was born in a city called Newark, here in New Jersey. Newark is a vibrant city filled with art, poetry, and love. Very early in my life, my parents fostered a love of reading in our household. My dad was a technician, and my mom was actually the teacher at my elementary school. Then she became the vice principal, and then she became the principal. So I had no other choice but to love books growing up. My parents were strict. They had very high expectations for me. I had 2 jobs as a child, and that was to do my chores and to work hard in school. My payment for doing my jobs was weekly visits to the bookstore. That was my reward. And honestly, it was such a special experience for me because nothing topped that moment of walking through the bookstore doors. Shelves just from ceiling to floor, lined with books of all kinds, adventures and new lands, stories of heroes, both real and fictional, and books filled with hope, dreams, truth, and possibilities. Becoming an author, however, was always a hidden dream of mine, even though growing up, a lot of the books I read didn't feature characters that looked like me or characters who lived in the cities, the types of cities that I lived in growing up. There was no way for me to be an author when I didn't see myself as such. So I tucked that dream in the back of my pocket and I did the next best thing. I became a teacher. I followed in my mom's footsteps. Becoming a teacher really reignited my passion to write because of the increased diverse books. Together, my students and I, we would read books by such authors as Jacqueline Woodson, Meg Medina, and Jewel Parker Rhodes. They wrote the types of books that I would have loved to read as a child. Local bookstores served as somewhat of a master class for me. It was my safe space to read, to learn, and to grow in my craft as a writer. Now, booksellers became my friends. They became my allies in my journey to becoming an author. They learned my name. They asked about my reading tastes. And whenever I walked into the store, they always had a new recommendation for a new book. Their kindness and their eagerness gave me the courage to write, which eventually led to me writing the book of my heart, All Because You Matter. Now, a bit of inspiration for the book. It's this guy. I became a parent. And when I gave birth to my son, Christopher, I remember wanting to keep him shielded from the cruelties of the world. I wanted to keep him little forever, just like any parent wants. But you know, time waits for no one. Christopher grew up and he entered school. and he had questions about everything. He learned things, he read things. My son experienced moments that made him question the injustices against people of color. And I knew that right then and there, the time was up. I knew I had to write this story. And my purpose for writing All Because You Matter was to write a love letter to my son, but really to all children, and especially to children of color, to remind them of their worth, the legacy in which they come from, and how it's their job to continue that legacy. I find All Because You Matter to be a conversation starter for families, really a means for us to teach our children, to help them build empathy and strong leaders. Now, as we approach the publishing date of October 6th, I'm so excited and I can't wait. I have a special wish that I'd like to share. And I think this goes without saying that this is really the same wish that Bryan has too, and even Christopher, because my son, Christopher, I did write this book in his honor, and All Because You Matter is as much Christopher's book as it is ours, Bryan and myself, which leads me to my wish for all of you attending this wonderful event today. My wish, will you join Bryan, myself, and Christopher in sharing All Because You Matter, to remind children, especially children like my son, that they have a place reserved for them here in this world. I ask that you take the time to really think about the meaning of the book, the legacy and the people from which our children come from, because that matters as well. I ask that you share this book with everyone. This is not the type of book that is specific to one audience or even one age. This is an all ages picture book. Will you stand up to those who feel otherwise, who go against the message of this book, of how much our children matter? Will you normalize these types of conversations about important topics, and truly for those who need it most? Bryan, myself, and Christopher, we ask that you share All Because You Matter with every patron that walks through your store doors. Use this book to keep meaningful cross-cultural conversations going and keep that at the forefront. Like I said, this is not the time to be silent, especially now, especially during these extremely trying times. I believe that now more than ever, we need to remind our children of all the ways in which they matter. And at this time, I would like to introduce the man, the myth, the legend. I am so honored to have done this book with Bryan. And I speak the truth when I say he is literally one of my favorite illustrators. And it's a dream come true to work with him. I adore all of his books, particularly Dave the Potter, but now All Because You Matter is my favorite. So I'll turn it over to Bryan.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us all. Thank you for all the booksellers that are online, book lovers. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here this morning. My name is Bryan Collier, and I'm an author and illustrator, but I mainly illustrate. And my entree into books was at probably what I remember about age 3 or 4 when I got the book Snowy Day. Ezra Jack Keats is my guy, and Snowy Day is my cornerstone. That's my book. That's my book. That's the first time when that little boy Peter opened up the book, and Peter looked back at me, and I saw we looked just alike. I was 4. I don't know how old Peter was, but I saw myself, and I think it was a setup because I had the same pajamas that Peter had on in the book. And it's the shot with him looking out the window and the snow coming down. Our heads are shaped the same. He was brown, and it took me to another place. And I've never forgotten what that felt like. So lo and behold, I grew up after I discovered I wasn't going to be Dr. J. I became an artist, and eventually I started entertaining the idea of making picture books, and the idea of Snowy Day and Ezra Jack Keats and even Harold and the Purple Crayon. Those books always stayed deep within me, and that's what I turn to when I start to consider trying to tell a story with clarity and truth and honesty and a mirror of reflection of what the world looks like for me and how it sounds like. And when I got the book, and I've illustrated many books, but when I got the book, All Because You Matter, I tasted the words, as you enunciate the words and how they roll off your lips and come through your mouth, and what that story holds. And it was like an awakening, the work that Tami has done in this particular book, because it has you question, okay, for our children, if you are a caregiver, an educator, a teacher, a librarian, and all these children walk through your door, what a wonderful gift you have to hand to them and talk to them, have conversations about, to say to them, you have a place in this world, and it was here way before you got here. You were thought of, and like Tami said, they made a place for you. That's amazing. That's amazing. And when I considered doing the book, of course, Tami and Christopher were the perfect models. And I know in the beginning when we did it, we went to a library and we did a photo shoot, a little mock-up photo shoot. And people didn't know what we were doing in that library. We were just taking pictures. I said, we'll do this and do that. But it's all captured in the book. And look at that beautiful boy. Then they bring tears to your eyes. The beauty alone, and the ancestors and the voices that are happening behind them. It says everything. And I'm so proud and so honored to be a part of telling this kind of story, because that boy is me. That's me and Peter when we first met in Snowy Day. And that's the moment that I want our children to know, to find out your power, your place, and your beauty is always, it's been waiting for you to show up. And that's a testimony of this particular book. Now, before we get to the end of this, there is something that is critical. Just like Tami said, we want you to have a conversation with every single kid that walks through your doors and hand them this book. But the story is not over once they've read it or been read to. It's not over, because I want that kid to turn to their teacher, their parent, their caregiver, or somebody they love, and read it back to an adult. Because the magic of this particular book is when it goes full circle, when we all realize we matter. We all had a place for us, even if you didn't realize it until you were an adult. The planet has been waiting for all of us to show up at this particular moment. And this is a perfect conversation for that kind of talk and that kind of explanation, and explaining what's happening outside their window, on their TV set, explaining what's going on the whole planet. There's a reshuffling, there's an uneasy thing. This book speaks to it, and it's almost prophetic how this all came together. We started this a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. And now it showed up on the planet at the right time. This is perfect time. You couldn't even, you couldn't time this better, if you tried. So while I go on, we can go to the, I want to show you some originals of how I started when I did this book. I started with the shape of petals, little petals, color that I painted faces on. These are the voices. These are the ancestors. These are the ones that said, we're making room for you. You're not here yet, but we're making room for you. And we started to build and build and build these petals into a blossoming image, a flower of so it's a blossoming of sorts. So we start here and then we build it up, layer by layer. It's watercolor and collage, but it's layered, it's pieced together, much like my grandmother's quilts when I was a kid. She was a quilt maker. And I started layering this stuff, piece by piece. Look at those hands. The part in the book when it's a knapsack full of wishes. See, it's just not me thinking about how to tell a story visually. See, we were in a room, and this is Liza Baker's idea. This is the Liza effect right here. She did that gesture with her hands coupled and said, what about, and that's all she needed to do. I said, oh, okay. Okay, I see. And then I created this image here. And those petals are sort of caught like a knapsack full of, these are all the wishes and desires that those that came before us have for us. There's a place in this world for you, and we're making a place. We're working hard to make this place for you. And here's that beautiful boy, Christopher. You can see Tammy in her eye, in that boy's eyes. Look at Tammy. And all the voices. And that's because I think images, and they have sound. The colors have sound. And they have voices, and there's passages of color. There's all kinds of ideas that are being portrayed here. And you can have dialogue and wonderful conversations with your children, if you're a caregiver, or your students, about how stories are told and how you can be reflected in books. And this is not just in locally, this is all over the planet. This goes worldwide, so it speaks to the whole deal. And that's what I'm so honored and humbled to be a part of, this kind of activism and storytelling. And this is what I love about making books and telling stories and communicating, because that builds community and it builds a bond and a connection with the young person. But when that person turns and reads it back to you, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. I levitate when that happens. And that's what I so want for this particular book. It's a full circle book. It won't let you out of the room. You can't deny it. You can't dismiss it. You can't walk by it. It has you. It's one of those things that it's always been waiting for you. It just landed on the planet at the right time. And that's what I'm so excited about it. Watch it. It'll be dynamic. You'll see. And thank you for your time and giving us the opportunity to share this with you this morning.
Bryan, thank you. Tami, thank you. I have goosebumps, and I'm sure everyone who's listening does too. Amazing presentations. Thank you both. We do have some questions. I'm going to begin with a couple of my own, and then I encourage folks to chime into the Q&A and share your own questions. Bryan and Tami would love to answer them. I'm going to start with a question for Tami, which was alluded to during the presentation a little bit, but as some of you may know, it is highly unusual for an author and an illustrator to meet one another. Oftentimes that communication goes through the editor, and sometimes they actually never meet one another at all. But as Bryan mentioned, this was an exceptional project, and we knew we had to bring together Tami and Bryan. And Tami, I'd love for you to share a little bit about that special partnership, the special meetings, and how that partnership came together with you and Bryan in creating this book. And also, I just love at the end for you to share a little bit about the deep sense of pride in legacy that is so key and core to this story and the message you want to share. So, Tami.
Okay, so you're absolutely right. Typically, authors and illustrators do not even communicate in the process of making a book. And I respect that process because the illustrator needs a chance to tell the story in his or her own way. But this book, this was the book that I held on to the words that I wanted to say to my son. I kept them kind of bottled up for years. And the words to this book came to me in a dream. And I will never forget because I heard the words, I heard the poetry and lyricism of the words, but equally so, I saw the art. They say that matter is all things that make up the universe. I saw Bryan's art and I knew it was his because you can't deny Bryan Collier's art. You see it and you just know. So I woke up and I immediately wrote the entire manuscript, envisioning that art. And this was the fastest thing I've ever written. This was the fastest manuscript that my agent said, oh, we're going out with this right now. So everything came together just like in my dream. It truly was a dream come true. And I had, like I said, I've been such a fan of Bryan's forever. So to have him hop on this project, like agree to it, it was such an honor. And what really made the moment special was when he invited Christopher and myself up to New York. We went to a library, a little upstate New York, and he did like a little photo shoot with us. And my son had to miss a day of school, which was totally worth it. And it's been a real process, like the most beautiful process of working with Bryan and my son being a part of this. He's creating his own legacy through this book, and it makes me so proud. And speaking of legacy, the point that I wanted to make with this book is that my son does come from a legacy of ancestors who were builders and inventors. And I find that at times history teaches us that, you know, Black history started with slavery. It did not. Long ago, our people were kings and queens, and they were building and inventing all of the things that we take for granted now. So I really wanted to tell the story both in text and with Bryan's art of the fact that our legacy extends far beyond that. And particularly with my son is half Haitian. And particularly, I wanted him to know that he comes from a legacy of ancestors who literally liberated themselves from the bondage that they endured for many years from France. So I want him to be resilient and carry that on his back like a knapsack of wishes to lead him forward into the future.
Thank you, Tami. That's beautiful. Bryan, I have a question for you. You share in your author's note, and you mentioned during your presentation that your grandmother was a quilt maker. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about her influence on your work, on your artwork, especially in this book. And also you did share the petals. I always just am blown away seeing those ancestral petals. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how those petals came to be, particularly in telling this story.
Okay, yes. Yeah, my grandmother was a quilt maker, and now I'm the youngest of 6 kids, and we live next door to my grandmother. And since I was the youngest, if I was over at my grandmother's house, I had my own room. I had the TV to myself. You know, it was a selfish sort of thing, you know. And she doted over me, but she also made these quilts. And when I was younger, I just didn't really, I didn't pay attention to them until I became older, and saw the significance of them as an artist myself, you know, because I found myself doing collage work. But then when I looked at her quilts that she made 30 years earlier, she was doing the same thing. You know, I call it a silent gift, and it's sort of handed to you and you don't know it's there until something ignites it, and then it blooms years later. It's the equivalent of one day you wake up and you sound just like your parents. You ever done that? You know, and it's a jolt. You jump back because, oh, my grandpa used to say that very phrase, or my mom talks like this. You know, it's the silent gift. It gets handed to you and you pick it up and it shows up one day. And so I take that with me in all the collage work that I do. But when it came to the petals and the faces, that happened outside of making books, where I was just making art and I was experimenting, and then I started cutting and making little faces, and because I was talking about sound and how words and sound and the other things that happen. I mean, I work in a 3D or 2D situation, but now I'm trying to bring the element of sound, capture sound in the visual. Much like when music is played, it has color, right? So I'm playing with those ideas, those abstract ideas, when I'm doing a book like this, and I'm making my own artwork. And these petals will be flowers. They could be the background of the sky in the book. It could be all those things. It doesn't really matter what it's transformed in, but all I want you to know is that under every shape is a voice, and it's speaking, whether you see the face or not. Maybe it's just the background doing it, but they're voices. They're all the voices that Tami's talking about in the text. They're all the people that came before us. There's people that we don't know that assist us and help us, just like you do as booksellers. How you see a kid, so that kid could use All Because You Matter. And then lo and behold, they read the book and somehow they transform or excited and ignited. That's the voice, that's the effort, that's the thing. So every inch of this book is there for a reason. There's no mistakes. There's no accidents, no great little accidents happening. They're all intentional. Every word that Tami crafts is intentional, because this book is so powerful. It lets us do this. It leads us through to do this. So that's what that's about.
So poetic, Bryan. Thank you. I'm writing down your words. So inspiring. This is a question both for Tami and for Bryan. Tami, we'll start with you. We all know that this book is one that is going to be talked about far and wide and really change people's lives for the better. I know how proud we are of that and how much we hope for that. But Tami and Bryan, we'd love to talk a little bit about what you have in store for us next beyond this book. Any projects you'd like to share and talk about today?
Sure.
Go ahead, Tami.
I will go first. So yes, All Because You Matter publishes on October 6th, and I kind of wish we could just freeze that day for several months, just so I could just live in the moment. But alas, I do have another book publishing with Scholastic. I actually have it here. It's a young adult novel in verse, and the title is Muted, where All Because You Matter speaks to the Black Lives Matter movement. Muted speaks to the Me Too movement. Long ago in my olden days, I actually was in a singing group, an R&B singing group. And, you know, we had our little moment. It was fun. But one thing that I wanted to address in this book was to talk about what could have happened if we ran into the likes of a predator, because the Me Too movement it's here, and it's definitely a topic that we need to address. So I wrote this book in honor of an artist who wants fame at any cost, but there's some hard lessons to learn along the way. So that's my next project, YA novel in verse, Muted, with Scholastic Press.
All right. Well, I have a book with Scholastic that I'm working on. I'm closing out now. And it's called We Shall Overcome.
Ooh.
See that? And it's about, it's about bridging yesterday and today in terms of activism and marching and sort of reimagining We Shall Overcome in today's time. So there's kids that are marching through history. And so you'll see scenes that are in both color and black and white. It's all watercolor and collage. And I'm having a ball with it. This is all I can show you today. I have more, but I'm almost finished, and I just want Scholastic to see it, really first in this. But We Shall Overcome is be finished in a week or so, and I'm so excited about it. But I'm also excited. We're not going to talk about much of it, but Tam and I have to do something else together. Another book together. So look for us to, yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. No matter what anybody says, we're going to do it. So I'm excited about We Shall Overcome, as well as Tammy and I, we the dynamic duo. We're going to come back and do it again. Something else that I'm excited about too. I've seen the text, so we're gonna do it.
Well, I'm an editor beaming with joy here. Love to hear that. Thank you both. Very exciting future books. Bryan, I have a question for you. There was a question about the cover design and how the cover came together. And in addition, and maybe you could speak to the case cover as well. In addition, a question about the horizontal lines across Christopher's face.
Okay.
And what those represent to you.
Well, this is the cover. And normally when I'm making a book, I can never really see the cover, or I can imagine what the cover is until I'm almost done. And we look at the art and we see what really pops out, really, because it's sort of this organic thing that happens. Whereas all these images that I've been working on, I can't quite see what really pops. And then something will show up and it'll pop out, and it's undeniable that that has to be the cover. And Christopher had to be on the cover. It had to be him full frontal, all the beauty, all the glory. And then with the petals, it was naturally and organically of the voices on the side. Now, here's the image you're talking about with the lines in his face. Those lines are, I had done a book called Freedom River, and it was about an escape, slavery escape. They escaped through a river. The river was only 1,000 feet wide at a certain point. And John Parker, who freed a lot of slaves, he was an ex-slave, he got his freedom, but he would bring these slaves back over into a free state to a river. So what I did is I painted the river in everybody's faces. We're all on the planet, we're all connected by a river. So it's the river of connection, the flow that you might want to say. And that wasn't spoken in the text. That was never even alluded to in the text. But as a storyteller, I'm listening to voices. So I bring all that stuff that I hear, even though it's not spoken necessarily into the text, to give it, to really anchor it for me. Because when you walk in the room, you're bringing 1,000 people or more. We all bring all our stuff. So when I'm isolated in my studio making the art, I'm listening, and I'm bringing all that to the table.
Thank you, Bryan.
Mm-hmm.
Tammy, so many listeners are commenting on the beauty and power of the language in your text. And one question that came in says, the text is so lyrical with words like barrios and mahal kita and montañas. What is the significance of including words in different languages in the writing of your poetry?
I love that question. So I'll say this is definitely a book for everyone. This is a book for all children, for sure, because we have so much to learn for each other, from each other. But specifically, I wanted to honor children of color. And what better way to do that than through other languages as well? Because I think that, you know, as people of color, we are not a monolith. We don't just speak one language. We don't just come from one country. We're worldwide. And if I could have included more languages, I would have. But particularly those words, barrios, montañas, you know, to me, those words sound like strength. Mountains. When you think of mountains, you think of beauty and strength. And mahal kita is a phrase in Tagalog, which is the language of the Philippines. And it means I love you. And honestly, when I hear it, growing up, I had a best friend who was Filipino. And so I learned a little bit. But when I hear mahal kita, to me, it sounds like love. So I wanted to bring that in as well, to really honor all children of color, to let all children of color know that they come from strength, beauty, and resilience. So that's why I included a sprinkling of other languages to really show the fullness of us as people of color.
I love that. So beautiful. Tami, another quick question for you, maybe not so quick, but how does Christopher feel about being featured in this book in the way that he was featured? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
This kid, let me tell you, if he was not in virtual school right now, he'd be right here next to me. This is not my book, and I'm sorry, Bryan, this is not even your book. It's Christopher's book. He thinks he's famous now, and he's just loving all the attention that he's getting, and that the book is getting. I think that this is the greatest gift. I don't know if I'll ever get this chance again. Bryan Collier literally immortalized my child with this art. So even when he's 17 years old and wants nothing to do with mommy, you know, I'll have this book of him frozen in time. So he's really so proud of it. And he's just going around and telling everyone that, you know, he has a book, not me.
He's just sharing it with us.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay, we're starting to wind down, and Bryan, I just wanted to ask, one of our listeners asked if you could share how you select the materials that you use in your collage. Is that influenced by each individual book? How do you go about selecting your collage materials?
Yes, when I go into making a book, every book has its own color and shade and tone. So whatever I was working on before, I get rid of, out of the way. And then old magazines, and I paint in watercolor on watercolor paper, and I use glue. And you know, it's really basic stuff, because that's it doesn't have to be that complicated because everything, the storytelling alone and the juggling of ideas is enough that I can handle. And so what I do is I listen to the text and try to garnish a color from it. What does it look like? What color is the light that's falling on Christopher? What are all these colors? What do they mean when I put all these colors and faces together? And you see a passages of color, and I'm having a blast with that. But I'm mindful of color and tone, and it's really just a feeling and intuition as to how I choose it, because what does it sound like? Where does it take place? What time of day? Is it interior or exterior? Where's the light source? You know, what kind of light source is it? And then light has to be a character in the book also, you know. So when it's a bright beaming scene, that light in the text, in the visual, is a character within itself, unspoken. So that's the approach.
Really powerful. Thank you, Bryan. All right, I think that brings us to the end of our presentation today. Tami and Bryan, thank you both so much. So inspiring, so moving. And thank you all of you listening today for taking our book, All Because You Matter, and looking for it on October 6th when it goes on
Yes.
sale. We appreciate your time today and thank you for joining us.